right, accursed. It's Thursday, and it's the curse of politics. This is a day of two milestones. We are 2 weeks from E-Day today. We have exactly 2 weeks left in this campaign before voting day. And the second thing is we're less than a week away from a live Curse of Politics taping next Wednesday night. Scott and I were out drinking last night, and I won't do it again until next Wednesday because it fucking makes this painful in the morning, I'm telling you. But
like Sinatra, when he knew he had a big run of shows coming up in Vegas, he'd quit smoking, quit drinking, look after his skin. David is cleaning it up.
Absolutely, for the stretch run. Anyway, next Wednesday night, that's going to be fun. Jenny, are you going to be in good form next Wednesday night?
I'm going to be in great. I'm always in great form.
You're always in great form.
Oh.
No. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Me too. And maybe something will have happened in the campaign that we can talk about by then.
Well, we can only keep our fingers fucking crossed.
Totally. But today we don't have such luck. But we do have with us Allison Smith from Queen's Park Today. And Allison has been following what's going on, and she's going to tell us that yesterday and today are far more exciting than what we thought they were. Come on, bring it.
Good morning. The one thing Doug Ford didn't do last night was have to stand on a stage and resign his premiership. So he's one up from Jason Kenney out in Alberta. And I was just kind of thinking, there was a point early last year, sometime in the third wave, that they were kind of heading down the same path before Doug Ford hired Corey Tenike and cleaned out his cabinet and, just really kind of changed their approach on COVID there. So, I think in some ways a win for Doug Ford that it's almost
replaced
like
his cabinet with Corey Tenike.
Yeah.
That's right. Things were going a little choppy for me during COVID too, but I had Corey over and now I'm healthy and whole.
So I guess the road not traveled for Doug Ford, which has got to make, him and his team happy. What else happened? Doug Ford, he got 2 more labor endorsements and an endorsement from Hazel McCallion, the former mayor of Mississauga, who released a video for them. And she's still kicking.
Isn't that getting old?
I personally think so, but obviously it appeals to somebody. Yeah.
I thought it was in the cliche zone when Trudeau did it in 2015. That was like 7 years ago. So,
well, Doug did it in 2018.
Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I know.
Yeah, and Doug actually hired her as some kind of premier's office advisor at one point, although it was like very vague what she was actually going to do or if that actually happened.
He was going to hire her. She never ended up taking the position.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There was a little controversy and she said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to concentrate on Dick Van Dyke reruns. And
I have no idea why she's so well thought of. Has nobody ever been to Mississauga?
Oh, David, you're going to get notes and letters. Bonnie Crombie is going to come to your house with a stone.
It's true. Well,
it's not a model of urban design, I'll say that.
Definitely an exercise in political branding that went well for her, that's for sure, because everyone seems to, love her forever. Andrea Horwath was out in Kingston and Nepean talking about OHIP Plus, and the NDP was also going after the Liberals.
That's a Liberal program, isn't it? OHIP Plus, isn't that what?
Well, that's what the Liberals called it. She's calling it something else, but sorry, this is a long. For some reason, I got a lot to say, even though maybe not that much happened.
Right.
I'll jump to today. Stephen Del Duca is going to be talking about affordability again. This is his new getting
what do you mean
it
again?
done. Well, that's what he's saying on those news releases. That's what I said. They're listening to you. Doug Ford's news release or a media advisory every day says getting it done, announcement about getting it done. Now Del Duca says affordability. So they're listening to the curse of politics. Then he's going to travel to Ottawa, which is, that's a Liberal stronghold or, could be. So that makes sense. I don't think he's been there yet in the campaign, although maybe I'm wrong. Horvath is going to Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay. And Doug Ford's going to make an announcement in Niagara-on-the-Lake and then go to St. Catharines.
All right. Thunder Bay. Anybody know what's happening in Michael Gravel's seat? Are the NDP going to take that, or are the Liberals going to hold on to that seat? Anybody? Because that was, that was a big person. He had a big personal following up there.
It'll be a three-way fight, but I would think it'll come down to the Liberal, to the NDP and the Conservatives, wouldn't it? Like based on the current numbers.
The North, generally, although Thunder Bay has,
got its own dynamic,
sometimes been a different thing. We won both of those ridings in 2014. We didn't win much else.
And the Sioux could also be in play if you listen to the NDP, at least. Ross Romano there, I don't think is incredibly popular on the ground for various reasons. So they might have a shot picking up there. There's also going to be a couple Supreme Court items that are coming out. I don't know if you just want to know what you're going to see on Twitter today. The Supreme Court's going to say whether it's going to hear that case about Doug Ford's mandate letters that's been plowing through the courts. So I don't know. They'll say yes, they'll say no. And then, do you remember Brad Blair? He was the OPP commissioner for a while that got fired or quit when Ron Tavener was appointed early in 2018. So Brad Blair has been trying to sue Doug Ford for defamation ever since then, because Doug Ford was talking crap about him. But the courts have sided with Doug up until now. So the Supreme Court's going to perhaps take on that case. It might not be likely, but expect to see those things floating around the social media sphere today, too.
Ron, nothing to see here, folks. Tavener, you bet.
Talking crap. I like that when you get spicy, Allison. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And for this and so much more, go to politicstoday.news and sign up for a trial of Queen's Park Today or Parliament Today. Alberta Today is going to be a good one. If you get there before 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, you can get a free trial of our edition about Jason Kenney's resignation.
Excellent. Good promo.
Politicstoday.news.
There we go. Thank you, Allison.
Thanks.
Great to have you. See you tomorrow for our last one of the week.
See ya.
Yeah. So we've been talking the last little while here about our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and more specifically, how their world-leading technology and their compassion are inextricably linked in the way they do business. Driven by social purpose, TELUS doesn't just believe you can drive social change as part of a successful bottom line. They act it every day in caring for the environment, modernizing agricultural practices for better food outcomes, in bridging the digital divide, community giving, and in what I want to talk about today, healthcare. Health for Good is the name of a number of TELUS's community-centered programs that improve the way practitioners get critical care to the most vulnerable among us. And because I told you TELUS believes that what gets measured gets done, and I'm a bit of a data geek myself, here are some numbers that help tell that story. Last year, 4 new TELUS mobile health clinics were unveiled in Victoria, Vancouver, Toronto, and Niagara region. Partnering with local health organizations, these things deliver quite literally compassion on 4 wheels, a fleet of highly connected vans powered by TELUS health technology. Last year, they rolled into our most vulnerable communities and supported 35,000 patient visits, administering over 9,000 COVID vaccinations. Healthcare is just one aspect of TELUS's ESG commitments, environmental, social, and governance, and how they put the well-being of their customers, communities, and the planet first. You can read more about it all in their sustainability and ESG report at telus.com/sustainability. So, Jesus, Jenny, obviously the Jason Kenney thing is the big news of the day in politics in Canada. You know him pretty well. Do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah. So listen, everyone I'd spoken to up until yesterday was like, he's going to eke by. It's going to be like 65%. He's okay with that. And then the results for the ballots were it kept getting pushed back. So it's 45 minutes late. Then it's going to be another half an hour late. And so anyways, and then someone messaged me and said 51.4%. Pardon me. And it was like, oh, there's no way he can stay on with 51.4%. That's essentially a loss. Listen, I think 60% would have been lost. And so I guess the reason that there was more time given in terms of making the announcement was he was figuring out what he was going to do.
Yeah. What do you think ultimately drove all this?
Listen, and I say this, and I personally like Jason a lot. We've talked about him a lot on the pod, and he's a friend. I've known him for years. I think that it was a bit of his COVID policies. No one was happy with him. Conservatives were very unhappy with him, and I think it was things. People don't forget certain things, and I think him getting caught, for example, at the Sky Palace having drinks with his buddies while the province was locked down did not help. If you remember, it was what scotch are you? He's sitting and drinking scotch with his friends, and I think the Premier's office response was, "Well, it's Jameson's. It's a low grade scotch. It's not like fancy scotch,
Irish whiskey." He's completely scot free on that. Then,
and so, anyways,
scot-free.
I think that there was a whole host of issues, and he was just never able to. It was never able to cover. We know what politics is like, right? Like if things aren't going well, there are certain things you have to do. Like you recalibrate to try to make things better. And Jason and his people, and I should just say Jason because the buck stops with Jason, was just unable to get his footing back in terms of kind of winning back caucus in the party. So.
It's such an interesting juxtaposition that you have Ford, seemingly on a path toward a renewed majority government. And there you have Jason Kenney getting thrown out by his own party a year before an election. Governments that really weren't that different, didn't have that different results. And yet you have this very, very different reaction from the people toward the government.
Well, sometimes it's personality. There's a lot of difference in what the popularity or that Doug has within the Ontario caucus is a lot different than where Jason is.
Right.
Yeah. I want to weigh in because I think that's I think a couple things. First of all, I don't know Jason as well as you, Jenny, but I have a lot of respect for the guy. In all honesty, I don't often agree with him. Sometimes I do, but yeah, I like him and I respect him. I know you've known him a long time, David. And so it's just you hate to watch somebody's career just kind of like it's kind of like the ass falls out of it. Like it isn't like, so it's not a great way to go. So you can't help but just as a political professional kind of look at it and go, oh man, that's so unpleasant to watch. So, and I mean that sincerely. That's not some sort of, I'm not trying to be a shit talker there. I think there's two issues. I think one is obviously COVID. And I think that Alberta public opinion probably was less different than Ontario, just to make that comparison also than we think. And I'm not as convinced that it was.
You think the conservative membership thought he was too lenient on COVID?
No, I said the public. I think that he made the classic fish nor fowl problem mistake, and I think that the public was actually probably more anxious and more tolerant of lockdown issues and more tolerant of masking issues, but his own party, and he was thinking about it, and he had obviously internal divisions, and so he was thinking about that, and so he went from guardrail to guardrail. Sometimes he was the premier who had to say, I'm sorry, I'm obligated to impose these. Sometimes he was the UCP politician who would say, by God, these kinds of restrictions on your freedoms are ridiculous. And the incoherence of that, I think, really made him vulnerable to both constituencies and got him gobbled up by his own party and the Johns and the Daniel Smiths. I also think it's a cautionary tale. I think it shows you that there are limits to this, populist, anti-government, grievance politics rhetoric. I mean, if you tell everybody that the people in charge are liars and shits and the institutions of government are not to be trusted, then when you find yourself as the leader and as the person that must preside over those institutions, don't be shocked when people look at you and go, well, maybe you're a liar. And so it's a little bit of fouling your own nest thing. And I think there's lessons to be learned there.
Jenni, are they going to go more in a Wild Rose direction? Do you think? Do you anticipate what kind of is Brian? Would you say that Brian Jean is the front runner for the leadership?
Brian Blue Jeans? Is that how his name is?
Yeah.
Listen, I actually don't know. There was a lot of talk. I'm in Ottawa. There was a lot of talk last night among the group I was talking to, of course, about Danielle Smith. I think the next question that people are going to be asking, or that has to be dealt with in Alberta, is what happens in the interim. So I've heard two things in the last kind of 12 hours or so. One, that Jason will stay on until the new leader is chosen. And then I've heard that there are some members of caucus that do not want that at all. They do not want him to stay on. They want a kind of a clean slate with an interim leader. And so I guess that will be something we see over the next 24 to 48 hours.
Man, I would get, if I was advising him, I would get out of Dodge. Like, with a verdict like this, the idea of hanging around, I just think that's a bad idea. I think it's diminishing. I
thought Don Braid was floating the idea he might actually run for the job.
He had ruled that out before, hadn't he?
I would be shocked if he runs. It would not be, as a friend of Jason's, I would say, if he was to ask, I would say he should not do that.
Danielle Smith's holding a newser I saw on this indisputable source of truth called Twitter, which is holding a newser at 11 Alberta time.
How could anybody ever entrust her with their political party again after she did that thing with Prentice?
Yeah, hard to imagine. Does it linger? I mean, it's the thing I think of instantly, Jenni. But does it linger within that membership?
It does linger within some people within the membership, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, it was like a unilateral downing of tools. Like, oh, my party, this party doesn't need to exist anymore. That I lead.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I've never seen anything like it. It's a stunning development still. I mean, it also turned out to be terrible political judgment. But in terms of
judgment,
when you're a leader of a party, you're a custodian of that institution. You can't just kill the party for your own political ambition. It was insane.
Agreed. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be very interesting to watch Alberta over the next few weeks.
Yeah, yes, it sure will. More interesting, perhaps, than watching this fucking campaign. Why is it that in Ontario, if a person wants to tear down a wartime bungalow and build a mansion, they can? But if they were to turn that same bungalow into a multi-unit home, they'd find themselves in a sea of red tape. Our original sponsor, the Ontario Real Estate Association, says one way to fix the housing affordability crisis in Ontario is by ending exclusionary single-family zoning in high-demand areas. Currently, it is illegal in some neighborhoods to convert a single-family home into a townhome, duplex, etc., without a zoning bylaw change, which delays projects, drives up housing costs, and leaves people stranded without an affordable place to call home. Ending exclusionary zoning, like governments in California, Portland, and New Zealand have done, would allow for the building of duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes on lots traditionally zoned for single-family housing without unnecessary and lengthy case-by-case approvals. OREA is calling on the next government to use the Planning Act to implement as-of-right zoning in Ontario's highest-demand urban neighborhoods and put an end to local zoning rules that hold back the development of much-needed starter homes that people can afford. The current policies are at the heart of Ontario's housing affordability crisis in high-growth areas, and it's time the province steps in to modernize these archaic laws to best help middle-class families find a home in the community in which they grew up. You'll be hearing a lot more from OREA over the next several weeks about Ontario's housing affordability crisis and what can be done to fix it, because OREA wants to ensure every Ontarian has a fair shot at home ownership, and that starts with ending exclusionary zoning. Read OREA's plan at ahomeforeveryone.info. Let me just be a broken record again for the however many goddamn days we've been doing this. So yesterday, Del Duca goes somewhere in Toronto and talks about EI premiums and how he would adjust EI premiums for parental leave. and Andrea Horwath goes somewhere, and she talks about pharmacare and how she would bring in pharmacare. Literally to God, when these people in these campaigns are sitting around looking at the tour, what do they think these days are going to do for them?
Listen, I don't know. I actually don't know. Like there are a lot of days when you're sitting and you're going through your leaders tour, and you're making an announcement, but it's an announcement, but it's not gonna it isn't gonna light the world on fire. So it's an announcement, but it's an excuse to talk about something else, or where you'll do some form of attack, and that's not happening. These are just announcements for the sake of announcements with literally nothing else.
I mean, it's all white noise, right? Like Greg's polling is telling us, and they presumably have similar stuff, that like, Jenny, a third of people have heard something from either the Liberals or the NDP. Like they're not paying attention to this shit.
No,
right?
Well, there's nothing to pay attention. There's nothing exciting about it. And like with Greg's poll, David, is he doing just party ballot or is he doing a split?
I think he's just party ballot.
So that's even like that. So it underestimates even the Ford universe, right? Like Doug polls higher than the PC party right now. So it's an underestimation. Abacus does the same thing. Is that it would be more interesting if they did if there was a split in terms of
what happens when you throw the leaders' names in.
Explain that for people, David, because as a pollster, you made that change, right? You made a methodological change in the way you put that question, didn't you?
I've always thought the way I prefer to ask it is leader and party name. So we would always say, are you going to vote for the Liberals led by Stephen Del Duca or the Progressive Conservatives led by Doug Ford? Because I think those are the two considerations people have in their minds. I've always been opposed to the polling question that asked if you're going to vote for your local candidate, because that isn't how people think of the election campaign. They think of it in terms of the leader and party. So yeah, I think you get the closest prompt to the actual ballot question when you include the leader's name in the question. I shouldn't speak for Greg. I actually don't know, to be honest, sitting here at 6:30 in the morning, whether or not he's got the leader's name in there. I will have to check.
I heard that same argument, though, for what it's worth from conservatives. I heard from senior conservatives supporting Doug saying, when you factor in the alchemy that is Ford Nation, at least in GTA, certainly in like Etobicoke area and Yorks and all that kind of stuff, plus the empirical fact that Doug's running ahead of his party, a pure ballot measure will underestimate the party's strength, probably, and what they'll actually end up on voting day. By the way, I think I hear what you're saying about where the campaigns were yesterday, David, but I would just say I think maybe there's a little more logic to it than we give them credit for. Like, I think maybe the NDP are like, well, we just have to stick on healthcare. Like I assume they're going to have to re-engineer the tour. Why they're in Kingston is beyond me. They're going to have to re-engineer it, whether they like it or not, to either sticking in the north and southwestern Ontario. They're up in the north today. And or figure out what their relationship is going to be with 416. I heard from a New Democrat yesterday who told me that the 416 campaigns effectively believe they're on their own now, that Andrea is an anchor, not a kite, and they have to just campaign on their own with ground game and hope that they can pull it out. I don't know if the central campaign thinks that. And the Liberals, I assume, they're just, I would think that this is kind of almost their last day. This would have been their last day in Toronto, right? Like, try to tap down one riding there that they don't have right now, make sure they're going to steal it back, and then move
but I don't
on.
care. It's not the location so much, right? Because frankly, that doesn't matter that much. It's not the location, it's the content,
right?
Like, I mean, in 2014, we're sitting around the table, and Peter Donolo says, why don't we go to Walkerton, right? And because Hudak's proposing all these cuts, why don't we go to Walkerton? Right? No, we didn't go to Walkerton to fucking announce an EI policy. Yeah. We went to light the fucking Conservatives up for cuts to regulations.
Yep.
Why? If you want to talk about healthcare, talk about healthcare. If you're Andrea Horwath, go to a long-term care home, hold a news conference, and fucking light Ford up for what happened in that home over the course of COVID.
And it'll be interesting to see what Del Duca defines as affordability today, because a couple of these things that have been billed as affordability haven't felt like there's real affordability plays. But as Allison says, at least they're now purporting to talk about that. But if I were him, I'd be hugging the 905 constantly from now on.
Yeah. So what does Ford do right now? Nothing. Just keep going.
He keeps doing what he's doing. Like it's working. So why change things? He goes, does his events, does his media events in the morning, does his presser, and then you go on with your day. I'm not sure why he would change things. It's really, really working for him.
Right. I thought yesterday was a marvelous event for Ford. I really did. Like I think, he's pushing into territory that's not inherently his by any stretch of the imagination. Once again, profiling institutional labor coming on side for him. Also, by the way, don't underestimate how important it is to actually show up at the event, have those union leaders with you, right? Personally advance and cement those relationships, right? What are they talking about when they're not in front of the cameras? They're shaking hands and having coffee and slapping backs and saying, all right, don't worry, right? There's going to be 30,000 workers turned over to you on E-Day in critical ridings across the province. I mean, so all that stuff pays off, but I also thought the messaging is, pretty good for them. Stelco is, it's as roll up your sleeves, sweat off your brow, working class as it gets. And, I thought it was a well-composed event. So I would just do that. I would inch into those seats that are genuine swing seats, but that edge toward pickup territory, right? And just keep pounding away, because I kind of think the conservative spin is the objective truth. I think the conservative spin is we're ahead a little bit more than you think. We're stronger than you suspect. And we're happy if Del Duca and the Liberals trade seats in Del Duca and the NDP trade seats in 416, and we'll fight it out in southwestern Ontario in the north with what appears to be a continuously eroding NDP offering.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think that, they, the lead is bigger because especially, the way things roll out in the seat models, they're still generating numbers in the 70s in terms of seat count. Because they're really only significantly challenged right now in the 416 area code, and most of the switching appears to be going on between Liberal and Conservative and Liberal and NDP. So, they just roll on unless somebody decides to upset that apple cart somehow, and I don't know if there is anything left that would do that. But so with 2 weeks left, Jenny, what kind of things do you start thinking about in HQ? 2 weeks left. What are you tactically? What are some of the things you're starting to do?
Well, you're already like you're now you've already, if you're in the org side of things, you've already been worried, been starting to focus on get out the vote, because you can vote at any time. But now that you're heading into advanced polls and what have you, that's what your sole focus is on. And especially when you're looking at ridings, I know the Conservatives are looking at pickups in certain ridings. So if you're looking at pickups in 7 or 8 ridings, those ridings is your laser focus is absolutely on get out the vote on those. You want to get your votes out early so you don't have to worry about them afterwards. So and you're just praying, you're counting down the time. If you're in the other campaigns, you want more time. And so the plus that the Conservatives have is the resources that they have. They have strong associations on the ground. They have campaign candidates who have been it has been indoctrinated into them almost about what needs to happen during this campaign, which is money, volunteers, and then getting your votes out. And so I think it's probably a good feeling in the Conservative war room. You're just hoping the time goes by a bit faster. And in the other two, in both the NDP and the Liberal war room, you're probably wishing you had another week.
Scott, what are you seeing out there?
I won't even bother with the Conservatives because I agree with Jenny and what we've said already. I think the Liberals have the most complex set of decisions to make, and I think the NDP have the most unpleasant set of decisions to make. So start with the NDP. It's what you said yesterday. It's your curse yesterday, or your blessing that you sent out, David, which is, I think Nanos came out with numbers that reflect what Greg has said. So it appears as though there's an emerging consensus that the NDP have dropped down into the low 20s province-wide, and the region story is as Greg described it yesterday. So as a consequence, you've got to figure out where you where you re-engineer your campaign if you're the NDP, and all of those are shitty choices and bad conversations. You got to try to keep the team together, even as you start cutting off parts of the body.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you think there is a difference between what's in the interests of the New Democratic Party right now and what's in the interests of Andrea Horwath?
I think that difference might be more pronounced if Andrea Horwath was a first-term leader rather than a four-time Carney. As a four-time Carney, I think her career is over, and so hopefully and probably that means that they'll be guided more by what's it mean for the party, but potentially. I mean, they might want to retrench and hold on to as many members as they can. She might want to throw the ball deep to see if she can get something. Yeah, I would imagine that they won't permit that kind of logic.
Yeah, there's no way that the party's going to, at the end of the day, look at this and say, oh, she picked up a couple seats here, lost 4 or 5 seats here, and she deserves a 6th kick at the can. I don't see how that happens.
I think their bigger anxiety is that they probably have lost all but maybe a couple of those seats, or it looks like they're going to lose all but a couple of those seats. There'll only be a couple that they could really fight for and hope for in Toronto. And so is there an institutional interest in, preserving a couple of those people that might be future leadership candidates, and, versus concentrating all your efforts on trying to fortify the North and Southwest? So those are all really ugly, very difficult, very internally grinding decisions. I think for the Liberals, it's complex because they have to figure out what do they say, where do they go, and what do they do to try to actually build momentum. They've taken it feels like they've made a step. The next step is one, that allows them to walk past the NDP. The next step is how do they actually press forward? And if they're going to do it, they got to do it in 905. And what's that going to take? And I think that's a more difficult puzzle to solve, but it means at minimum he's going to be in the 905. It means that he's going to have to focus a lot more on affordability. It's going to have to be sharpened up. The war room, if they've got 1 or 2 grenades in their pouch, now is the time to hurl them, especially on the long weekend. Like today would be the perfect day to launch an effective war room attack, because if it's effective, you knock Ford off stride today, get him to respond to it tomorrow. It lingers and is written about over the weekend, and hopefully people absorb it in a way that they absorb news a little differently because it's a long weekend, and maybe you create a new chapter going into the last 10 days of this campaign. That would be the ideal scenario if you're them. I just don't know if they have such a grenade. And it can't be this fucking gravy boat thing they did a week ago with Mitzi. It has to be a full-fledged fire-packed punch.
Excellent. All right. Half hour's flown by, maybe not for listeners, but for me. And it's time to wrap up with our blessing or our curse. Scott, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm going to repeat myself, and I'll be quick. My blessing is to the Conservative campaign. I'll put a little curse in there. I thought yesterday was a crackerjack of an event. I thought it just displayed all the strengths that Ford's got. The reach out to labor, the institutional integration of labor, the message to workers, the lunch bucket, Reagan Democrat, Ford thing that he's got going. I thought it was just an absolute shining, gleaming pony of an election day. The slight curse tweak I would put at the end of it, the asterisk, is there were moments where Ford's messaging tripped into self-commentary. Hey, folks, I'm the one that's got these union guys. Look at my union guys. And I think you want media to report that and to reflect that. You don't want to be saying it yourself. And the difference between saying that and bragging about it is very marginal. And he doesn't want to. But I think there's a little bit of a danger that the Conservatives feel real chuffed. And they don't want to start looking like they're taking a victory lap with 2 weeks to go and that they're getting ahead of themselves and getting boastful. So I would just say keep your zipper up, guys. This thing isn't completely finished.
Yeah,
I think this thing they've pulled off with the private sector unions is an absolute coup.
Yeah.
It just muddies the waters so much. It takes the edge off any Conservative party to be affiliated with Labour like that. It makes it much harder to portray the Conservatives the way that the opposition parties like to portray them. And it's actually, I think, one of the more interesting and successful plays by a political party I've seen in Ontario politics in a long time.
I agree completely.
Yeah, I agree. And Scott, actually my blessing and curse was almost essentially the same. It's the Conservatives are doing well. And now is the time to just put your head down and continue doing what you're doing, because it's worked leading into the election. It's worked for the last 3 weeks. So what you don't want to do is get cocky and get cocky, because that's when mistakes happen. So it would, if I was in Doug's war room, it would be as fun as things are going, as good as things are going. The numbers are great. I'm sure the metrics on the ground in terms of voter ID and stuff is fantastic. You just got to put your head down and get through the next 2 weeks, and not, as Scott said, do a victory lap.
All right. I couldn't think of a blessing or curse today, so I'm just going to bless my great friend Bill Fox, who had his book launch party last night at the Albany Club. That means I've been in the Albany Club twice in the last week, by the way. I'm starting to get a rash. And
I thought we'd get kicked out of there last night. I thought after slagging the Albany Club and making fun of it, that some elderly gentleman would lay his crickety skeletal hand on our shoulder and say, please leave, gentlemen.
I did everything I could. I wore jeans to get kicked out of that place. But anyway, Bill Fox, great book. Trump, Trudeau, Tweets and Truth. You heard about it on the Herle Burley. Pick it up wherever you can. Great book. And we will see you tomorrow for the last week episode of this week's Curse of Politics on the Ontario election campaign. I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and our sponsor, the Ontario Real Estate Association. I'd like to thank Allison Smith for being with us today. And of course, Scott and Jenny. It's early morning this morning. But thanks for coming out and chatting with me. It was fun.
I love you very much, both of you. I love you. I love you deeply. This is Scott Reid signing off, possibly for good.
All right. See you tomorrow morning, guys. Take care.